I know most UConn fans didn't want to hear this early, but the transfer portal is open, and we're open for business. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I wanted to come up to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all the support, no matter where we were, stores, Hartford, Raleigh, hopefully soon to be Tampa. People come up to you and up to me and say how much they love the show and excited for the future. So we're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men and women's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Okay, the transfer portal is open, and UConn will be major players. We do not have any confirmation on players from UConn's current roster that have decided to enter the portal. Whenever we have that, we will definitely report on it on socials, as well as doing episodes as to potentially why, if they decide to come back, things of that nature. Because most of these transfer portals, unless there's a coach leaving, they leave the door a little bit open. Like, for example, a great opposite of that is Bryce Hopkins, who's transferring from Providence, and it's likely down to St. John's or Georgetown, right? So that's a relationship that he's not going back to Kim English. I don't even know if it has anything to do with Kim, but it's mostly just wanting a change of scenery, maybe going back to Ed Cooley, more familiar with that, or going to the dark side of just kidding, the St. John's, Red Storm, and Rick Pitino to potentially get some of that vitamin water money. So yeah, and help the Red Storm win another Big East championship. So it was a frustrating year. There's no doubt about it, but we are going to go through this as just like we did last year. Essentially what we did last year, I'll give you my methodology. I've spoken to many coaches, spoken to a lot of insiders in this transfer portal world, and how you can use deductive reasoning to really find out who UConn is targeting, is to go back into the last couple of years of recruiting and see who they have relationships with, who they offered, obviously what the needs are, because if you offer a bunch of bigs and you have all these bigs coming in with, whether we find out if Terrace is staying or leaving, you still have Eric Riba coming in. You still have Yusuf Singari, who we don't know if he'll transfer. So a lot of things are still up in the air. But what we do know, and I think what most of us fans would like to see, is a stalwart point guard that's not undersized, potentially someone that's a combo guard. We're used to the Tristan Newtons, the Cam Spencers, but I think people tend to forget that we have also won championships with small guards, the Ryan Boatwrights, the Kemba Walkers, the Shabazz Napiers. So it really is a matter of not necessarily the size of the player. I know, Dan Hurley has a type. I know he has the type of profile that he loves. And if you can have the best of both worlds and the Steph Castles of the world that are 6'6", almost 6'7", and they're also a point guard and they're also a combo guard and they can also go get you a bucket and are a lockdown defender, then obviously you're going to want to target those players, right? But if there are some deficiencies, either as a shooter or as a defensive player, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. So we're presenting the transfer portal list of some familiar faces, potentially some fresh starts for them, who already have a relationship with Luke, Kamani, Tom, and Dan, and potentially could come in and be fits at UConn. These aren't people that we have any confirmation of UConn contacting, although I have heard a few names that have been contacted by UConn pretty aggressively already. So we'll get to those here in a second. But yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with some folks who they've already offered recruiting wise, and that's Taylor Bowen. That's the first name that pops off for me because he is you're talking about trying to get bigger and stronger and also longer. He's a 6'10" forward from Florida State who originally came out of Brewster Academy, a place UConn fans know well. Bowen was heavily recruited by the Huskies at a high school and has always had tools. He's incredibly long. I think he's got a 7'4" wingspan, mobility. He's got incredible defensive instincts. He's a good shot blocker, a jumper that's coming around in terms of the mid-range game. He averaged 10 points and 5.6 rebounds, shot over 40% from three last year. Leonard Hamilton is stepping down at FSU, so Bowen hit the portal with 2 years left of eligibility, and he could make a ton of sense as a versatile front court piece in stores to kind of have another athletic wing. You could probably play him at the 4 too, if, say, Alex Caravan doesn't come back, or even if he does, to kind of give you some depth there. That's a name that immediately popped out to me when he hit the transfer portal, knowing their history of recruiting him in the past. Another name that just popped into the transfer portal that UConn fans may already know that UConn has ties with is Mackenzie Mgbako, the 6'8" forward who initially committed to Duke but then flipped to Indiana. He's leaving with Tucker. Is it Tucker DeVries or Darian DeVries is now the Indiana head coach. UConn was heavily involved during that initial recruiting cycle, and Mgbako had an up and down freshman year, but then last year he played really well. He's got incredible talent. He was let's look at some of his stats quick. Yeah, Mgbako averaged about 12 points a game, 5 rebounds. He was a 33% three-point shooter, so that's not bad. 80% from the free throw line. Good defensive player, touching 6'9". I think this is a player that makes a ton of sense if you're trying to get bigger. If you look at some of the big-time teams that are still in the tournament, I know we hate them, and I know that you guys are not going to like this, but Duke is a great example of what the roster construction should potentially look like for UConn. If you can find a Sion James who's 6'6" that was a combo guard, that's essentially playing point guard. He hasn't really played point guard much this year, but he's so big and strong. That's the difference, right? UConn had guys this year who have played some point guard, some combo guard, but are 6'2", 6'3", 6'1", kind of get pushed around a little bit. And so if you get bigger in all of these different positions, you kind of minimize some of the issues, like Dan has even said that, when they had to kind of maneuver around Hassan's knee injury, it's like, well, if we're going to turn the ball over, it might as well be bigger. So I know that that's not exactly what you want to hear, but it's a very good team that is likely going to make a Final Four and is dominating right now in the tournament. And if we're going to get back to that level, which we showed we are definitely capable of in that Florida game, I think there's going to be some bigger players that UConn goes after, and not just at point guard and not just at combo guard. So these two kind of more wings with the anticipation of potentially losing Jalen Stewart, maybe Jay Ross. You have to replenish them, and having older guys that have a couple years of eligibility that are bigger, stronger, faster, that have done it already at the college level may be the way to go. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue on some of these familiar names and then realistic targets that I'm calling Hurley guys coming up after this. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan in the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada clear-cut Team of the Week is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games this year, Coach Cal's Hogs fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball to not only make the NCAA tournament, but knock off back-to-back national champion and Hall of Fame coaches en route to Sweet 16. That actually is wrong. They did not knock off the back-to-back national champion because that's UConn. They did knock off Bill Self, who has 2 titles, and Rick Pitino, who's a Hall of Fame coach. They accomplished all of these without a second leading scorer, Boogie Flans, for the most SEC play, and without leading scorer and rebounder, Adu Thare. And so far in the NCAA tournament, they've been phenomenal. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say, go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what Arkansas has done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out there and ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Armada, the Rogue, or the Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Let's get back to this transfer portal list. There's one other transfer portal list that, I was talking to one of our, fans and just, another fan on X. And initially when I saw that he was in the transfer portal, I wasn't like, oh, yeah, that makes sense because, he's a combo guard, Isaiah Coleman. He's leaving Seton Hall. And he just didn't jump out to me. But at 6'5", they offered him in 23. So he obviously has a familiarity with Dan Hurley and staff. He's a slasher. He's definitely a dog. He definitely plays good defense. He's not exactly a lights out shooter, but I guess that can get better. Tristan Newton wasn't a 50% 3-point shooter. He had his moments, and I think he shot 33%. So that's kind of what Isaiah Coleman is. He's a 30% 3-point shooter. From the 2024 cycle, you've got 2 recent high school recruits. But yeah, I think that's Isaiah Coleman could potentially be. I don't know if Dan Hurley will pull a Patino or an Ed Cooley and take someone from in the conference. I think that kind of stuff is definitely still available, especially if Coleman's not going back to Seton Hall. Like there's kind of no point in not pursuing him if you want him, and if you obviously still feel like he's a type of kid that you can put on your team. So then if you look at it for the 2024 cycle, you've got 2 recent high school recruits who are already on the move. Austin Swartz, a 6'4" shot maker who was high on UConn's board. I forget which school he was at. Let me double check that really quick. That Austin might be a tough one because he did go to Miami and he's leaving. Ja Lucas is taking over for Jim Larinaga. But a lot of that is Miami gives a lot of NIL money. So if it's an upgrade you're looking for, UConn's probably not the school for you. I mean, UConn has a robust NIL budget. So don't get me wrong. They pay the players that they really feel are impact players. Do they get it wrong sometimes? Probably. But what I can tell you is that, we're still a top 5 NIL program in terms of the amount of money. And here's one thing you'll never hear at UConn. Well, I didn't get paid. UConn's not doing that. I know there's some programs that have, and coaches are being sued about it. So, Derek Queen, the guy who hit the buzzer beater for Maryland, who was Liam's high school teammate, made a comment. They asked about, what is it about Kevin Willard that, you guys love? And he goes, well, first off, he, made good on the payments that he said he was going to make with the NIL money. So, but that's a huge part. Like if you have to worry about if you're going to get paid what you were told you were going to get at a school, that's an issue. That's not happening at UConn. So if that's one thing I can assure any recruit that potentially listens to any of this stuff, or they're figuring stuff out. Just ask Steph Castle, ask Alex Caravan, ask Cam Spencer, any of the guys who came here maybe for a little less money, but definitely got paid. You might want to have that conversation with some of these players, right? So that's kind of where we're at with those guys. The other one that's an interesting one is 6'8", Josan Sanan. I'm not sure how to say his name. Athletic, high upside wing. He's at Arizona State. That's Dan's brother, but he's leaving. Not Dan, not Bobby, but Sanan. We were in the mix for him as well. Both those guys, Swartz and Sanan bring scoring ability in different ways. One's a wing, one's more of a shooting guard. It'll be interesting to see how UConn evaluates their development and whether the interest still lines up. And also, who better to call than your brother and say, hey, man, what was this kid like, once you got him in the program? Is he just looking for a quick buck? Is he looking just to maybe come back closer to home? That kind of stuff. So you can really, I think that's the one thing that UConn has done a really good job of. Have they made a couple mistakes? Like some might say they made a mistake with Ahmad Noel. Some may say they made a mistake with Aiden Mahaney. But, you're not going to be 1,000%. And what I mean by that is I'll elaborate. I don't have a problem with this, but I think a lot of fans do, and maybe the coaching staff does. I doubt it. I really do, because as sensitive as some of the stuff is in the program, between some of the viral videos of Dan having, being caught saying something he would likely say to anyone's face, but then media making a big deal about it, or him talking about how he vets the parents just as much as the players, and how he doesn't want one player to kind of ruin the culture of his team, right? I don't think, and this is not making fun of Ahmad Noel at all. I think Ahmad could have been really great here. I think he still has an opportunity to be. If for some reason, what I think is a guarantee that he leaves, if he does stay, then obviously love him. Hope he stays. Hope he can wish him the best, right? Even when he leaves, I wish him the best wherever he goes. But I will say, and this is 100% pointed at fans who engaged in this behavior, that I absolutely do not condone. If a player's legal guardian, that he is saying that this is his son, if it's not his biological son, you sound like an a-hole if you're saying things to him on, and I'm talking about Tashid Carr, if you're saying things to him on X that is really inappropriate, that is saying like, you're not his father, you're his trainer, we can't wait to get you away from the program. That's just not, to me, that's not UConn basketball. And that is not who this fan base is. The fans that I've met and the fans that I've interacted with don't act like that. And if you are, and if you're a fan of my show and you don't like this take, then I'm sorry. I'm not backing down on that. I don't agree with some of the things that Tashid has said online, but there's no crime in posting things on social media. It's just because plenty of us have said dumb things in the past that we either regret or we double down on. And there's no issue there with us, right? We don't get held to a higher standard. So why are you holding a father, no matter what you think of him, to that standard? I, as a dad, can totally relate to if you feel like your son is really great at something, and clearly he was top 30 recruit just outside of being a McDonald's All-American, not getting run. A lot of that had to do with injury. A lot of it had to do with opportunity not being given. Maybe it wasn't earned. Who's to say? Not me. I'm not in the practices. If I ever get a chance to talk to Dan off the record, I'd love to find out what happened with that. I wouldn't tell you guys because I want him to understand that I'm just curious. Like I want to hear his perspective versus Tashid's or Ahmad's, right? So I hope he comes back. If he doesn't, that's why we're talking about transfer portal guys. But no matter what happens, can we stop with that? That's my plea to you guys. Don't add fuel to the fire. It'll work itself out. I don't think Dan Hurley is worried about his third string point guard's father talking loose online. That's my take. To go back to some realistic targets, right? The kind of guys like to kind of transition from, maybe that wasn't a Hurley kind of guy, right? Things that can fit UConn's culture: tough guards, high IQ wings, guys who aren't afraid to defend, take contact, compete every night, guys that you don't have to coax to compete or just say, hey man, I wish we'd see that version of that kid every night. It's just innately a part of them. A couple guys right off the bat who I know that they have relationships with. How about we start with Langston Love, 6'4" guard out of Baylor. He's got the frame, he's got the pedigree. He's shown the ability to knock down shots at a high clip. Love was actually elite from deep in 23-24, shooting almost 50% from three. Took a little bit of a step back this season, some injuries, some inconsistency, but he's looking for a fresh start. He's built like a linebacker at 220 pounds. He should be a plug-and-play scorer for a program like UConn if he gets his rhythm back. That, to me, is the perfect target for them as far as a shooting guard, as far as someone who can handle the rock and even get some point guard play, combo guard play from them. Another one is an older guy. There's not a lot of connection here, but Nick Boyd, he started 82 games, including the Final Four with FAU and Dusty May. He transferred to San Diego State this year and put up 13.4 points and 4 assists. He's a playmaker. He's from the New York area. So could be fighting it out maybe with a St. John's, with a Seton Hall. But I think you'd think that UConn could get in the mix if there's mutual interest. Stay tuned with that one. This is another one, and this is a guy who is local to me in Greensboro, but he's a Charlotte native. If you watch any mid-major basketball, it's rare to see a shooting guard that is 6'5", but is a phenomenal shooter. This kid, Donovan Atwell, he will end up being a household name if he goes to a bigger school, because he comes off of screens, very similar to solo ball. He's 6'5". He's lefty. He shot over 40% from three in over 7 attempts per game at UNC Greensboro. He's from Charlotte. Most expect him to stick in the South, but so think about some of these programs: Tennessee, South Carolina, Wake Forest. So it's not impossible to think if UConn fell in love with this kid, that he would at least take an opportunity to say, hey, UConn, good opportunity to go play for a high-profile coach. He just played for a guy like Mike Jones, who's a little more laid back. So maybe that's not a fit from a cultural perspective to come to UConn and just be intensely coached by Dan Hurley. So that's a big part of it. It's a realistic target, but maybe a wild card. And then there's Sam Brown, the UPenn guard who absolutely lit up the Ivy League this season. He averaged over 19 points per game in conference play and dropped 42 against Columbia. A cerebral combo guard with a killer instinct. And yes, he played at Kobe Bryant's alma mater at Lower Merion in Pennsylvania. Just under 6'4", 6'3.25". He's a little undersized for the two, but Hurley has shown he's not afraid to play smaller if the toughness and shooting ability are there. And then this one's another one that's kind of like a little bit like, again, a Hurley guy, Connor Enright, gritty, undersized guard out of DePaul. He's in the transfer portal. He's fiery. He's competitive. Just has the feel of a guy who carve out some rotational roles in a Hurley system. Played under Darian DeVries at Drake, so he's been coached hard. Might be more of a depth piece, but there's value in a culture guy like this, especially if he wants to come in and compete for a Big East championship and a national title. These are the type of players who thrive under Hurley, not just talented, but wired the right way. If UConn's looking to reload without losing their identity, there are some names to watch. Another one that I've been told that they've contacted via some back channeling. I won't use the word tamper because I feel like everybody does it. He's not in the transfer portal yet, but there's people that think that he may, is Rob Wright, point guard for Baylor. Langston Love obviously is on this list as well. He's a 6'1" guard, so again, undersized. But remember this, it's not about the size. You don't need a 6'6" guard all the time. If you have a 6'1" point guard who's an absolute dog and can play defense and is a scorer and is 200 pounds and is built like a tank, you don't have to worry about it. It's when you bring in a guy who's 6'3" and weighs 170 pounds soaking wet, then those guys get pushed around and get picked on. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about maybe some wild cards in a wish list that is a little bit outside the box, but there's some guys who fit the profile of what I just talked about as well. We're going to talk about that coming up after the break.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Get supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades. Supply House. With over 200,000 products from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need for plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work delivered fast nationwide. Their easy-to-use site is packed with resources, real-time support, and expert service to help you get the job done right. And if you're a pro, join their free TradeMaster program for exclusive perks like free shipping, a dedicated support line, and discounts on every order. Sign up at supplyhouse.com/TM and use promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your first order. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn Transfer Portal Edition. Transfer portal's been open for 24 hours. There's over 500 names in the portal as we speak. I think it's expected to hit 2,000 this year. I think there was 1,000 last year. Let's get a little bold with some of these predictions. Not necessarily predictions, but guys, things, people to look out for. Maybe some under the radar guys, but there's one that's right off the bat that's not really under the radar. High major player, played in the ACC, played for University of Virginia or UVA. Isaac McKneely. He might just be the best shooter in the entire portal. He's 6'4", UVA guards play defense. So for all those people that are like, well, he's a little maybe slow. That dude plays defense. So he averaged 14.4 points per game, shot 42.1% from deep this year. He's already at the fifth all-time in threes made in Virginia history. He's a classic catch and shoot guy, and he can defend. He played for Tony Bennett. If Ryan Odom can't convince him to stay, McKneely becomes one of the top portal prizes and a guy who could elevate any backcourt instantly. He can play point guard. He can play shooting guard. I really feel like this is a guy they're going to target. And I would target him as well. If you're talking about a player that fits UConn's profile, does Virginia play slow, methodical offense? Yes. Does UConn play slow, methodical offense with a little bit more pace at times? Yes. Can he light up the scoreboard? 100%. Is he a disciplined guy? Yes. You don't play for Tony Bennett if you can't handle coaching. Can he handle the intensity and some of the pressure that comes with UConn? I think so. He seems like a pretty low-key dude. Also, it's another McKneely. Can we get, if we're going to lose Liam McKneely, we can get Isaac McKneely, kind of swap him out. Maybe it'd be kind of cool to have two guys named McKneely if Liam wants to come back. I've heard people talk about that. We'll get into that tomorrow on our show. Another wish list name is TJ Power. 6'8" forward, used to be at Duke. He flipped to Virginia. He's also a 4/5-star guy a couple years back. He's a 3-level scorer. He can shoot the three. He was the Massachusetts Gatorade player of the year out of Massachusetts. So he's local to Connecticut in that respect. Power has the skill and offensive polish to thrive in that freer system. Think a thicker version of Alex Caravan in terms of how he plays, and he's ready for a bigger role. A place like UConn could be a great fit, especially if someone like Alex decides to go pro and does not come back. Then there's Bryce Harris out of Howard. This one's kind of like an out-of-the-box thought process. 6'4", 220 pounds. He's a grown man physically. He's looking for his fifth-year graduate availability. He averaged nearly 10 points and 6 rebounds this season. Plays with a ruggedness that reminds me of the older 2020, 21, 22 Hurley teams. He's a name that hasn't been mentioned a lot, but if UConn's looking for a defensive-minded wing with some pop, he's worth a call. He shoots about 33% from threes, also from Greensboro. Played at Greensboro Day School. I believe Liam McKneely's brother plays at is it Cooper Flagg's brother? A lot of the Monteverde kids either play at Greensboro Day, is another prep school. The kid's a baller. He's also got RJ Cole's signature of approval on X. So would love to see potentially that Howard connection come back. Lastly, Bryce Lindsey, the former Texas A&M guard, is now was now at James Madison. This was more of I wouldn't say a long shot because I feel like I've heard that they contacted him already. He's got the pedigree coming out of IMG Academy before an injury stalled his freshman season. JMU was a good landing spot, but now that he's looking for a step up to potentially come back to a high major team, I think this is a guy as a point guard. Look at Texas A&M plays a freewheeling style. They brought in a guy like Zurich Phelps, who I liked last year for UConn, who they didn't obviously pull the trigger on. Could be another name to look out for in this year's transfer portal. So we're going to have transfer portal shows a lot because it's going to be about a month long before this thing is over. We'll obviously break news if we hear of any players that are transferring out or if we sign anybody big. It's a wide open portal situation. So whether we get a McKneely level splash or like a sneaky pick like Sam Brown, or even a guy who's not in the portal yet, that like the kid from Drake, who everyone loves, that's a guy to look out for. So look, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, stay with us for all the transfer portal news. And as always, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.